As the dusky hues of twilight gave way to the profound black of midnight, I settled into the driver's seat of my bus, the vessel that promised to be my companion through the nocturnal silence of the town. I have driven the night route for years, but the day I broke the rules, the very fabric of my reality unraveled, thread by ghostly thread. The town was an antique photograph come to life, where the days were awash with sepia tones of sunlight and the nights, oh, the nights, were a canvas of impenetrable darkness. My employment began with a handshake and a sheaf of papers, one of which listed rules that read like incantations rather than operating procedures. Never stop on Grimwald Curve. Avoid the eyes in the rearview mirror. Ignore the whispers at the third stop past midnight. They seemed ludicrous, the whims of a superstitious mind rather than the guidelines for a bus driver, but I was not in a position to question. Employment opportunities were as scarce as daylight at midnight, and I needed this job. My first few shifts on the night route were as uneventful as the lifeless streets I traversed. Compliance with the rules was easy when the belief in their necessity was absent. As I drove, the town seemed to exhale a stillness so complete that even the mist seemed suspended in time, a ghostly audience watching from the wings of this quiet stage. Then came the night at Willow Creek Bridge. An ancient stone structure whispered to be older than the town itself. It was here, as I approached the midpoint of the bridge, that an involuntary shiver traveled down my spine, a primal warning from the deep recesses of my psyche. There, materializing from the fog as if painted into existence by an unseen hand, was a shadowy figure. Its arm was outstretched, a silent plea for passage. Every instinct within me screamed to press the pedal and carry on, to leave the figure to its silent vigil. And so I did, my heart pounding an erratic rhythm against my ribcage. The figure, consumed once again by the mist, became nothing more than a memory, a whisper in the back of my mind that I quickly silenced. The bus trundled on, its wheels a steady drumbeat against the road, its headlights cutting swathes through the fog as if to claim sovereignty over the darkness. But as the distance from the bridge grew, so too did a sense of unease within me, an inkling that the night was far from done with its eerie tales. My route continued in the ensuing nights, a monotonous journey through darkness, perforated by the artificial lights of the bus. Yet the mundane was shattered by a singular moment of transgression, a glance into the rearview mirror while crossing that damn bridge. Curiosity, that treacherous siren, led my eyes astray, and what I saw within the glass was a tableau that defied logic. Figures, spectral in their haziness, sat in the seats that mere seconds before had been unequivocally empty. Their outlines wavered as if they were made of the mist itself, and their whispers, oh, those whispers, they burrowed into my ears like malevolent parasites. Their words were indistinct, a cacophony of sibilance and breath that I felt more than heard. Following that night, a shift occurred, subtle at first, like the uneasy prelude to a tempest. The bus, an entity I had considered as inanimate as the roads it traversed, began to exhibit signs of capricious life. It would halt of its own volition, as if an unseen passenger had pulled the stop cord. Its headlights would flicker like the nervous blinking of a wary animal, and the radio, previously a source of solace, spat out static and staccato voices that seemed to be speaking directly to me, though I could discern neither their words nor their intentions. The true horror, however, lay in the encroachment of the shadowy figures from the world outside to the one within. Where there had been emptiness, there were now occupants, passengers that my ticket machine had not accounted for, passengers that the logical part of my brain refused to acknowledge. Their presence was an aberration, a violation of the laws of the natural world. Each time I dared steal a glance behind me, there they were, more defined than before, as though my attention gave them substance. Their eyes, if one could call them that, were vacant, yet seemed to bore into my very soul, and their whispers had grown in intensity, a ceaseless murmuring that clawed at the fringes of my sanity. I had become a charon of sorts, ferrying these lost souls along the night route, a task that was never in my job description. The rules I had once scoffed at now seemed like a lifeline that I had recklessly ignored. And as I continued to drive, night after night, I could feel myself descending into an abyss of my own making, a place where reality was as frail as the mist and just as impossible to grasp. That fateful night, as I halted the bus for an unseen passenger, an otherworldly frost descended upon the interior, a spectral chill that penetrated to the marrow. The doors, acting upon some unearthly impulse, yawned open to the void, admitting an absence palpable in its presence. My breath hung before me, a misty testament to the unnatural cold that now enveloped us. A silhouette coalesced from the darkness outside, a form I felt in the core of my being more than I saw, a phantom draped in the vestiges of a bygone driver. The air grew dense, pregnant with an electric anticipation, as if the night itself awaited a pivotal decree. A silent figure, harbinger of the night's deepest secrets, took its place among the rows of empty seats, an emperor surveying his domain of shadows and silence. The previous driver, though absent of substance, was overwhelming in his essence, a tide of sorrow and resignation that washed over me, seeping into my very soul. In the hush that followed, the message was clear, transmitted through the ether of shared fates. The realization of my destiny was a weight, an anchor tethering me to the unseen currents that now steered the course of my existence. I was not just driving the bus, I was part of its very mythology, a chapter in an endless narrative written on the tarmac with the ink of twilight. The phantasm of the driver dissipated as a mist against the onset of dawn, leaving behind a legacy not of words, but of silent understanding. His departure was as much a release as it was a binding, a liberation of his watch, juxtaposed with the shackle now affixed to my own spirit. The conclusion of my ordeal was not heralded by exaltation or salvation. It was a quiet capitulation to a reality that had been there all along, unseen, unfelt, until the moment of my awakening. I embraced the wheel with hands that were now conduits for the spectral legacy I had inherited. My own set of rules, a codex of survival and warning, would be my bequest to the next custodian of the night route. As a silent sentinel, I stood watch over truths that daylight would never reveal. The rules I bequeathed were not mere guidelines. They were lifelines, etched with the gravitas of those who had traversed the shadowed path before me. With each new driver, I hoped the rules would illuminate the dark, serving as a lighthouse to ward off the encroaching maw of oblivion. Now an eternal voyager on Route 13, I navigate an odyssey where time is as fluid as the ghosts that whisper in the seats behind me, where each stop is a monument to moments lost to the dark, and the journey itself is a penance and a privilege, written in the ceaseless cycle of night. No longer merely a driver, but a part of the route itself, my spirit was a custodian of the arcane edicts that I had once defied. These new rules, born from whispers of the fallen and inscribed with the somber wisdom gleaned from the other side, became my legacy. Each successor to the midnight route would receive this codex, a guide through the gloom, penned with a hope that bordered on prayer, that they might navigate the darkness without succumbing to it. I yearned for them to understand the gravity of the shadows that danced hungrily at the edge of the road, to respect the long winding road that I and others had paved with our silent sacrifices. The wheel of fate turned anew as a fresh-faced driver took the helm, their eyes alight with naive eagerness, oblivious to the spectral passenger that now accompanied them. The echo of a man who had once been as they were. I observed, a phantom in the periphery, as they clutched the list of rules with a skeptic's smirk, a mirror to my own past incredulity. The first page of their story unfurled, a hauntingly familiar prelude written in the ink of ignorance and curiosity, a tale ready to be etched into the night. As the engine hummed and the journey commenced under the watchful gaze of the moon, I drifted along, my presence woven into the very air of the bus that carried more than the living. The cycle perpetuated, a relentless loop where each new driver began their story with a rulebook, a beacon meant to guide, a warning meant to protect. And thus, the road stretched on, boundless and insatiable, beneath the silent, eternal vigil of those who had become one with its course.